The void between stars carried many things: radiation, cosmic dust, the whispered dreams of civilizations long dead, and occasionally, something that made the universe hold its breath. Commander Xylith Varen of the Galactic Coalition's 7th Expeditionary Fleet had seen most of what the darkness could offer in her 37 years of service, but she'd never encountered anything quite like the signal that now pulsed across her ship's communication array. "Ma'am, we're picking up something unusual," Lieutenant Korvac announced from his station aboard the Infinite Dawn, the fleet's flagship. His forearms moved with practiced efficiency across the holographic controls, his species' natural multitasking abilities making him invaluable in communications. It's definitely artificial, but the pattern is unlike anything in our databases." Xylith's elongated form glided across the bridge, her species' naturally flexible spine allowing her to move with an almost serpentine grace. The Solarian people had evolved on a world with variable gravity, and their bodies reflected that heritage. Her large, dark eyes fixed on the display as waves of data scrolled past in languages both familiar and completely alien. "Origin point?" she asked, her voice carrying the subtle harmonic undertones that made Solarian speech sound like distant music to most other species. "That's the strange part, Commander. It's coming from the Terminus sector, grid 7-7 Alpha. That's supposed to be empty space according to our charts." The Terminus sector. Xylith felt a chill run down her spine, though she couldn't quite explain why. It was a region of space that most civilized species avoided, not because it was dangerous in any conventional sense, but because it felt wrong somehow. Ships that ventured too far into Terminus rarely returned, and those that did came back with crews that spoke in hushed tones about things that moved in the dark between planets. "Analysis of the signal composition?" she inquired, moving to stand behind Korvac's station. "Binary-based, but with mathematical constants that suggest a high level of technological development. The signal strength indicates it's being broadcast on multiple frequencies simultaneously, with enough power to reach halfway across the galaxy." Korvac's secondary arms worked to isolate different components of the transmission. "There's also something else, ma'am. Embedded within the carrier wave, there's what appears to be a distress beacon. A distress beacon from an unknown civilization in the Terminus sector." Xylith's statement hung in the air like a challenge to the natural order. "How long has it been broadcasting?" "Based on signal degradation and the dispersion pattern, I'd estimate approximately 72 standard hours. Whatever sent this is either very powerful or very desperate. Or both," Xylith thought but didn't say aloud. The bridge of the Infinite Dawn buzzed with quiet efficiency as her crew worked to analyze the mysterious transmission. Around her, representatives of a dozen different species went about their duties with the practiced calm of veterans. The Galactic Coalition prided itself on diversity and cooperation, and her fleet exemplified those ideals. "Commander," called out Tactical Officer Thranks, a massive Krogan whose scarred carapace told stories of 100 battles. "I'm detecting elevated quantum signatures in the signal. This isn't just a distress call, there's some kind of data package embedded in the transmission." Xylith considered her options. The Coalition's primary mission was exploration and first contact, but they were also bound by strict protocols when dealing with unknown technologies. The Terminus sector's reputation made those protocols even more relevant. "Can we decode the data package without compromising ship security?" "Negative, Commander. The encryption is unlike anything in our databases. We'd need to allow the signal direct access to our computer systems to properly decode it. A risky proposition, but not an impossible one." The Infinite Dawn and her sister ships were equipped with the most advanced defensive systems in the Coalition fleet. More importantly, they were staffed by the best crews in the galaxy. "Chief Engineer," Xylith called to the Vulcan-like Telosian at the engineering station, "can we establish a secure partition for signal analysis?" Chief Engineer Velek's response came in the measured tones typical of her species. "Affirmative, Commander. I can create an isolated system with full quantum encryption barriers. Any hostile code would be contained within the partition." "Do it. And prepare the fleet for potential combat operations. If we're dealing with an unknown civilization, we need to be ready for anything." As the crew worked to establish the secure analysis environment, Xylith found herself studying the star charts. The terminus sector stretched across a vast region of space, its boundaries marked more by superstition than any real stellar formations. According to the most reliable surveys, it contained dozens of star systems, most of which remained unexplored. Commander, Korvac's voice carried a note of excitement. We're beginning to decode the data package. The primary transmission appears to be some kind of automated distress beacon, but there's also what looks like a more complex message embedded within it. On screen, the main display flickered, and suddenly the bridge was filled with an image that made several crew members gasp. It showed space, but not the empty void they were accustomed to. Instead, the darkness was filled with geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly, massive constructs that seemed to bend reality around them. The image quality is remarkable, Velik observed, her scientific curiosity overriding her usual emotional restraint. The resolution suggests scanning technology far beyond our current capabilities. Commander, Franks's voice carried a warning tone. I'm detecting massive energy signatures in these images. Whatever built those constructs has access to power sources that dwarf our entire fleet. The image shifted, focusing on one of the geometric shapes. As it zoomed in, details became apparent that made Xylatha's breath catch. The construct wasn't just large, it was impossibly large, easily the size of a small moon. Its surface was covered in patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched, as if the entire structure was somehow alive. There's more, Korvac announced. The signal contains what appears to be a linguistic matrix. It's trying to teach us their language. How long for translation? The AI estimates 6 hours for basic comprehension, 12 for full translation capability. Xylath nodded. Do it. And signal the fleet, we're changing course for the terminus sector. Commander, Franks's voice carried a note of concern. Shouldn't we report this to command first? We will, but by the time we receive new orders, whatever sent this signal might be dead. The Coalition's first contact protocols are clear. When faced with a genuine distress signal, we respond first and explain later. As the Infinite Dawn and her escort vessels changed course, Xylath couldn't shake the feeling that they were crossing more than just the boundaries of charted space. The signal had been broadcasting for 3 days, which meant that whatever crisis had prompted it might already be over. But something told her that wasn't the case. Something told her that the real crisis was just beginning. The translation process proved to be more complex than anyone had anticipated. The alien language, if it could be called that, operated on principles that challenged the Coalition's understanding of communication itself. Rather than simple word-to-meaning relationships, the linguistic matrix seemed to convey information through mathematical relationships and quantum state variations. It's almost like they're thinking in mathematics, Chief Linguist Parav explained during the briefing 12 hours later. The slight, scholarly Betazoid had spent her career studying xenolinguistics, but she'd never encountered anything quite like this. Every concept is expressed as a relationship between multiple variables, and those variables themselves shift based on context. Can you give us the basic message? Xylath asked, though she suspected she wasn't going to like the answer. The primary transmission is indeed a distress signal, but it's unlike any we've encountered. Instead of calling for rescue, it's calling for assistance in containing something. The exact nature of the threat is unclear, but the mathematics suggest something catastrophic. Xylath studied the data on her personal display. The fleet was still 6 hours out from the signal's origin point, and she was beginning to question the wisdom of their current course. What about the secondary transmission? That's where things get interesting, Parav continued. The secondary message appears to be a warning, but it's directed at us, not from the aliens. It's as if they somehow knew we were coming. That's impossible. The signal was broadcast before we even detected it. Not impossible, Commander. Highly improbable, but not impossible. If this civilization has developed precognitive capabilities, or if they possess technology that allows them to perceive probable futures, they might have anticipated our arrival. The implications of that statement hung in the air like a challenge. A civilization capable of predicting the future would represent a level of technological development that dwarfed anything the Coalition had encountered. It would also make them incredibly dangerous. What exactly does the warning say? Xylath asked. Parav's expression grew troubled. It's difficult to translate precisely, but the general meaning is clear: turn back. What sleeps here was not meant to wake. We have failed in our duty, and now the burden falls to others. Do not repeat our mistakes. Cheerful, Franks muttered from his position at the tactical station. Any indication of what they were trying to contain? The mathematical references are complex, but they seem to describe something that exists outside normal spacetime. The closest translation might be the space between spaces or the void that dreams. Xylith felt another chill run down her spine. In her years of service, she'd encountered many things that defied easy explanation, but this was different. This felt like something that shouldn't exist, something that violated the fundamental laws of reality itself. Commander, Korvak's voice interrupted her thoughts. We're receiving additional transmissions. Multiple sources, all from the same general area. More distress signals? Negative. These appear to be automated responses. As if our presence has triggered some kind of defensive system. The main display shifted to show a tactical view of the space ahead. Dozens of contacts appeared on the screen, each one representing a transmission source. As they watched, the contacts began to move, forming complex patterns that seemed to serve no obvious purpose. How many sources are we looking at? Xylith asked. Initial count suggests over 300 individual transmitters, but that number is increasing. Whatever's out there, it's big. 300 automated systems, all responding to their approach. Xylith tried to imagine what kind of civilization could deploy such a massive network of defensive systems, and more importantly, what they were defending against. Commander, Velik's voice carried a note of scientific fascination. The quantum signatures from these transmissions are extraordinary. The power requirements alone suggest technology that operates on principles we don't fully understand. Are they hostile? Unknown. The transmissions don't match any known weapon signatures, but they're clearly designed to track our movement. We're being scanned by systems that can penetrate our shields as if they weren't there. Xylith made her decision. Fleet order, battle stations. All ships maintain current course, but prepare for evasive maneuvers. If this is a first contact situation, we want to appear strong but not threatening. Commander, Franks's voice carried a warrior's instincts. If these systems can scan through our shields, our weapons might not be effective against them either. Then we'd better hope they're friendly. As the fleet continued its approach to the terminus sector, the number of contacts on their screens continued to grow. What had started as 300 individual sources had become over 1,000, and they were all moving with purpose. The patterns they formed were complex beyond easy understanding, but there was definitely intelligence behind them. Estimated time to contact? Xylith asked. 4 hours, 37 minutes, Korvak replied. But Commander, we're starting to detect larger signatures. Much larger. Define much larger. Preliminary scans suggest structures with masses equivalent to small asteroids. Multiple contacts, all moving in coordinated patterns. Xylith studied the tactical display with growing unease. Whatever they were approaching, it was clearly beyond anything the Coalition had encountered before. The smart thing to do would be to return to Coalition space and report their findings, but the distress signal continued to broadcast its urgent plea for assistance. Commander, Parev's voice carried a note of urgency. I'm detecting changes in the linguistic matrix. The aliens are updating their message in real time, responding to our approach. What are they saying now? The mathematics are complex, but the basic message is clear: you should not have come. The containment is failing. We cannot hold them much longer. Flee while you still can. Hold what? Who are they trying to contain? The references are unclear, but they keep mentioning something called the Devourers or the Hunger that Walks. The mathematical descriptions suggest entities that exist partially outside normal spacetime. Xylith felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's climate control. In her years of service, she'd heard whispered stories about things that lived in the spaces between stars, ancient entities that predated the rise of galactic civilization. She'd always dismissed such tales as superstition, but now she was beginning to wonder if there might be truth behind the legends. Commander, Franks's voice carried a note of professional concern. I'm detecting massive energy buildups ahead. Whatever's out there, it's preparing for something big. How big? Planet killer big. Multiple sources, all charging simultaneously. Xylith made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Fleet order, maximum alert. All ships prepare for combat operations. If we're about to encounter something that requires planet-killer weapons to contain, we need to be ready for anything. As the Infinite Dawn and her escort vessels prepared for battle, none of them realized that they were about to become part of a conflict that had been raging for millions of years. They were about to discover that the universe contained things far worse than hostile aliens or aggressive civilizations. They were about to discover that some things were imprisoned in the darkness between stars for very good reasons. And they were about to learn that sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is answer a call for help. The edge of the Terminus sector appeared on their screens like a wound in space itself. Where normal space should have been filled with the gentle glow of distant stars, here there was only a darkness that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The boundary wasn't sharp, instead, it was more like a gradual transition from the familiar to the impossible. Sensor readings are inconsistent, Velik reported, her usually calm voice carrying a note of scientific bewilderment. The laws of physics appear to be flexible in this region. Define flexible, Xylith commanded, though she suspected she didn't want to know the answer. Spacetime itself seems to be unstable. We're detecting gravitational anomalies that shouldn't exist, quantum fluctuations that violate several fundamental constants, and energy signatures that suggest the presence of matter that exists in more than 3 dimensions. Is it safe to proceed? Unknown. Our models can't predict how our systems will respond to such extreme conditions. We could experience everything from minor equipment failures to complete structural collapse. Xylith studied the tactical display, watching as the mysterious contacts continued their complex dance in the darkness ahead. The fleet was now less than 2 hours from the signal's origin point, and the number of contacts had grown to over 5,000. Whatever civilization had built this network of defensive systems, they clearly possessed technology that made the Coalition's most advanced ships look like primitive toys. Commander, Korvak's voice carried a note of excitement mixed with fear, we're receiving a new transmission. This one is different, it's not automated. There's definitely a living being on the other end. Can you establish communication? Working on it. The signal is coming from, wait, that can't be right. What? The signal is coming from inside the anomaly, but the transmission characteristics suggest it's originating from a point in space that doesn't exist according to our sensors. Xylith felt another chill. A transmission from a point in space that didn't exist was either a technological impossibility or evidence of science so advanced that it might as well be magic. Put it through. The main display flickered, and suddenly the bridge was filled with an image that made several crew members step back involuntarily. The being on the screen was humanoid in basic shape, but that was where the similarities to any known species ended. Its body seemed to be composed of living metal that flowed like liquid, and its face was a constantly shifting pattern of geometric shapes that somehow conveyed emotions despite their alien nature. When it spoke, its voice resonated through the ship's hull as much as through the speakers, creating harmonics that made the crew's teeth ache. Coalition vessel, I am Architect Zephan of the Eternal Vigil. Your presence here is unexpected, but perhaps not unwelcome. We have maintained our watch for 7 million of your years, and our strength finally fails. The Devourers stir, and our containment protocols are failing. Xylith found her voice, though it took considerable effort. Architect Zephan, this is Commander Xylith Varen of the Galactic Coalition. We received your distress signal and have come to offer assistance. The being's face shifted into patterns that might have indicated amusement or despair, it was impossible to tell. Assistance. Yes, we had hoped that others might eventually answer our call. But you do not understand what you have offered to face. The Devourers are not merely hostile aliens or aggressive civilizations. They are entropy given form, the inevitable heat death of the universe made manifest. What exactly are the Devourers? They are what remains when a universe dies. When the last star burns out and the final black hole evaporates, when time itself begins to decay, they are what comes after. They exist in the spaces between realities, feeding on the quantum foam that underlies all existence. They are hunger without end, destruction without purpose. The bridge fell silent as the implications of that statement sank in. Xylith had dealt with many dangerous civilizations in her career, but she'd never encountered anything that posed a threat to the fundamental structure of reality itself. How many of them are there? Numbers are meaningless when applied to the Devourers. They exist in a state of quantum superposition, simultaneously one and many, finite and infinite. A single Devourer can consume a solar system, but they can also fragment into millions of smaller entities, each one capable of devastating entire worlds. And you've been containing them for 7 million years? We were the last survivors of the previous galactic cycle. When the Devourers first emerged from the void between realities, they consumed everything, entire galaxies vanished in the span of days. We managed to trap them in a pocket dimension, a space between spaces where they could feed on artificial quantum foam instead of the real universe. Xylith tried to process what she was hearing. A civilization that had survived the death of the previous galactic cycle, entities that could consume entire galaxies, and a containment system that had been operating for 7 million years. It was too much to fully comprehend. Why is the containment failing now? The quantum foam generators require constant maintenance, and we have grown few over the eons. Many of my people chose to enter the final sleep rather than continue the endless vigil. Now we number fewer than 1,000, and the systems we built require 10 times that number to operate safely. What do you need from us? Nothing you can give, I fear. The Devourers are beginning to break through the containment barriers. When they do, they will consume this galaxy as they consumed the last one. Your ships, your worlds, your entire civilization, all will be nothing more than food for their endless hunger. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Xylith stared at the empty screen, trying to process what she'd just heard. If the architect was telling the truth, then they were facing a threat that made every previous crisis in galactic history look like a minor inconvenience. Commander, Franks's voice carried a note of professional calm that didn't quite hide his underlying fear. I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the anomaly. Whatever's about to happen, it's going to be big. How big? The energy levels suggest an event comparable to a supernova, but contained within a relatively small region of space. If that much energy is released all at once, it would sterilize every world within 100 light-years, Xylith finished. At minimum. And that's assuming the energy release follows normal physical laws. In this region of space, the effects could be far more extensive. Xylith made a decision that would define the rest of her career. Fleet order, maximum alert. All ships prepare for combat operations. If these Devourers are about to break free, we need to be ready to buy time for an evacuation of the nearby systems. Commander, Korvac's voice carried a note of confusion. We're receiving thousands of new transmissions. Multiple sources, all broadcasting on the same frequency. The architects? Negative. These signals are coming from the containment area itself. They're not using any known language, but the mathematical patterns suggest intelligence. The main display shifted to show a tactical view of the anomaly. What had previously appeared as a dark void was now filled with geometric shapes that pulsed with malevolent energy. As they watched, the shapes began to move, pressing against invisible barriers that sparked with contained lightning. The Devourers, Xylith whispered. Commander, Velik's voice carried a note of scientific fascination mixed with terror. The quantum signatures from these entities are unlike anything in our databases. They appear to exist in a state of controlled quantum superposition, simultaneously matter and energy, real and theoretical. Are they trying to communicate? Unknown. The patterns in their transmissions suggest intelligence, but it's an intelligence so alien that we can't even begin to understand its nature. It's like trying to have a conversation with a mathematical equation. Xylith studied the display as the geometric shapes continued their assault on the containment barriers. Each impact sent shockwaves through spacetime itself, creating ripples that her sensors could barely detect. The barriers were holding, but barely. How long until containment failure? Based on the rate of deterioration, I estimate 4 hours until critical failure. Once the barriers collapse, the Devourers will be free to enter normal space. 4 hours. 4 hours until entities that had consumed entire galaxies would be free to begin their work again. 4 hours until the greatest threat the universe had ever known would be unleashed upon an unsuspecting galaxy. Commander, Franks's voice carried a warrior's resolve. If we're going to make a difference, we need to act now. These architects might have been fighting alone for 7 million years, but they're not alone anymore. Xylith looked around the bridge at her crew, representatives of a dozen species, all united in their commitment to protecting the innocent and preserving galactic civilization. They were about to face something that could destroy everything they'd sworn to protect, but they were going to face it together. Fleet order, all ships, advance to combat range. We're going to help the architects hold the line. As the Infinite Dawn and her escort vessels moved toward the anomaly, none of them realized that they were about to become part of a battle that would determine the fate of the entire galaxy. They were about to discover that some fights were worth fighting, even if victory seemed impossible. They were about to learn that sometimes, the greatest act of courage was simply refusing to run away. And they were about to encounter something that would change their understanding of what it meant to be alive in a universe filled with unimaginable dangers. The first sign that something was wrong came from the ship's chronometers. As the Infinite Dawn approached the edge of the anomaly, time itself began to behave strangely. Seconds stretched into minutes, then contracted into microseconds, creating a temporal distortion that made normal navigation impossible. Commander, Velik's voice carried a note of scientific concern. Our temporal sensors are detecting massive fluctuations in the local time stream. The Devourer's presence is affecting the fundamental flow of causality. What does that mean for our ships? At best, we'll experience severe temporal displacement. Events might happen out of sequence, or we might find ourselves reliving the same moments multiple times. At worst, we could become trapped in a temporal loop, experiencing the same few minutes for eternity. Xylith studied the tactical display as the geometric shapes continued their assault on the containment barriers. The barriers were definitely weakening. She could see cracks of absolute darkness spreading across their surface like fault lines in reality itself. Signal from the architects, Korvac announced. They're requesting a direct communication link. Put them through. The main display flickered, and Architect Zephin's shifting form appeared on the screen. The being looked even more alien than before, its metallic body flowing like liquid in patterns that hurt to watch directly. Commander Varing, your presence complicates our situation. The Devourers are aware of your fleet, and they are excited by the prospect of fresh prey. Can we assist with the containment? Your weapons would be useless against them. The Devourers exist partially outside normal spacetime, conventional matter cannot harm them. But there is another way you might help. What do you need? The containment barriers are powered by quantum field generators that must be manually maintained. My people are too few to operate all the necessary systems. If your crew could assist with the maintenance protocols, we might be able to strengthen the barriers enough to hold the Devourers for a few more centuries. Xylith considered the offer. Boarding alien vessels to operate technology they didn't understand was incredibly dangerous, but it might be their only chance to prevent a galactic catastrophe. What are the risks? The maintenance facilities exist in the same pocket dimension as the Devourers. Your people would be exposed to quantum fields that could cause cellular disruption, temporal displacement, or worse. And if the barriers fail while they're inside, they'd be trapped with the Devourers. Yes. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Xylith looked around at her crew, seeing the same determination in their faces that she felt in her own heart. They were military officers, sworn to protect the innocent even at the cost of their own lives. How many people do you need? 50 of your crew, working in coordinated teams. The maintenance protocols are complex, but we can provide the necessary training. And the chances of success? Unknown. The barriers have never been reinforced using coalition technology. Your quantum field generators operate on different principles than ours. The interaction might strengthen the barriers, or it might cause catastrophic failure. Xylith made the decision that would define the rest of her career. We'll do it. Signal the fleet, I need 50 volunteers for a classified mission. Commander, Franks's voice carried a note of protest, you can't seriously be considering this. We don't know anything about these architects or their technology. This could be a trap. If it's a trap, then we're already caught in it. These devourers are about to break free whether we help or not. At least this way, we have a chance to make a difference. Within an hour, 50 volunteers had been selected from across the fleet. They were the best engineers, technicians, and quantum physicists the Coalition had to offer, and they were all willing to risk their lives to prevent a galactic catastrophe. The transfer to the architect vessels was unlike anything they'd experienced before. Instead of traditional shuttle docks, the Coalition crew was transported through quantum tunnels that seemed to exist in the spaces between atoms. The sensation was indescribable, like being dissolved and reassembled at the molecular level while remaining fully conscious throughout the process. The interior of the architect vessels was even more alien than their exteriors. The walls seemed to be composed of living metal that flowed like water, and the floors were covered in geometric patterns that shifted and changed as they watched. Everything was bathed in a soft blue light that seemed to come from the metal itself. Welcome to the Eternal Vigil, Architect Zephin's voice resonated through the ship's hull as much as through the air. You are the first organic beings to set foot on one of our vessels in over 3 million years. Chief Engineer Velek stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her natural caution. Your technology is remarkable. These quantum field generators operate on principles we're only beginning to understand. We have had 7 million years to perfect our techniques. But perfection means nothing if there are too few left to operate the systems. Zephin led them through corridors that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, past machinery that defied easy description. The quantum field generators were massive crystalline structures that pulsed with contained energy, each one the size of a small building. The maintenance protocols are complex, Zephin explained as they approached the first generator. The quantum fields must be calibrated precisely, or they will collapse. Your role will be to provide additional power coupling while we adjust the field harmonics. What about the Devourers? Asked Lieutenant Commander Twara, the Vulcan-like officer who was serving as the mission's tactical coordinator. Are they aware of our presence? Oh yes. They are very aware. The Devourers feed on consciousness as much as matter, they can sense the thoughts and emotions of living beings across vast distances. Your presence here excites them greatly. As if responding to Zephin's words, the ship suddenly shuddered as something massive impacted the containment barriers. The lights flickered, and the geometric patterns on the walls began to pulse with agitated energy. They're testing the barriers, Zephin explained. The Devourers know that the containment is weakening. They're probing for weak points. How long do we have? Hours, perhaps less. The barriers are failing faster than we anticipated. Your arrival has given the Devourers hope, they believe that fresh prey awaits them beyond the containment. The Coalition crew worked with desperate efficiency, following Zephin's instructions to couple their ship's quantum field generators with the architect systems. The process was incredibly complex, requiring precise timing and coordination between technologies that had been developed millions of years apart. Power coupling at 60%, Velek reported. The field harmonics are beginning to stabilize. Excellent. Now we must synchronize the quantum frequencies across all generators simultaneously. If even one generator falls out of phase, the entire containment matrix will collapse. As the crew worked, the attacks on the barriers intensified. The Devourers seemed to sense that their prison was being reinforced, and they were responding with increasing desperation. Each impact sent shockwaves through the ship that made it difficult to maintain their footing. Commander, Tvera's voice carried a note of concern, I'm detecting quantum signature changes in the containment area. The Devourers are doing something different. Define different. They're merging. The individual entities are combining into larger, more powerful forms. The quantum mathematics suggest a single entity with the mass energy equivalent of a small star. Xylith felt her blood run cold. A single devourer with the mass of a star would be capable of consuming entire solar systems in a matter of hours. If it broke free from containment, nothing in the galaxy would be safe. Zephin, what happens if they successfully merge? The combined entity would be capable of breaking through the barriers through sheer force. Once free, it would begin consuming the quantum foam that underlies all reality. The process would spread throughout the galaxy at faster than light speeds, unraveling the fundamental structure of spacetime itself. The entire galaxy would die? Everything would die. Stars, planets, civilizations, all would cease to exist as the quantum foam that maintains their existence is consumed. The galaxy would become a void, empty of matter, energy, and even the possibility of existence. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just fighting to save their own civilization, they were fighting to preserve the very concept of existence itself. How long until the merger is complete? At current rates, approximately 2 hours. But the process is accelerating. The Devourers are drawing power from the quantum foam leaking through the barrier cracks. Then we need to work faster. All teams, maximum efficiency. We're not just fixing a containment system, we're saving the universe. As the coalition crew worked with desperate intensity, none of them realized that their efforts were being watched by something far more ancient and powerful than either the architects or the Devourers. Deep in the quantum foam that underlay reality itself, something stirred that had been sleeping since the birth of the universe. Something that had been waiting for exactly this moment. Something that was about to change everything. The first sign that something had changed came from the quantum field generators themselves. Instead of the steady blue glow they'd maintained for millions of years, the crystalline structures began to pulse with a new color, a deep, warm gold that seemed to resonate with something fundamental in the universe itself. What's happening? Xylith demanded as alarms began to sound throughout the architect vessel. Unknown, Zephan replied, but for the first time since they'd met, the ancient being's voice carried a note of uncertainty. The quantum fields are singing. This is not something we programmed into the systems. The golden light grew brighter, and suddenly the coalition crew could feel something in their minds, a presence that was both alien and strangely familiar. It was ancient beyond measure, but it carried a warmth that reminded them of home, of safety, of the feeling of being protected by something infinitely powerful and benevolent. Commander, Velek's voice carried a note of scientific wonder. The quantum signatures are unlike anything in our databases. This isn't architect technology, and it's not the Devourers either. This is something else entirely. The presence in their minds grew stronger, and suddenly they could hear a voice, not through their ears, but directly in their thoughts. It was a voice that seemed to come from the stars themselves, ancient and wise and filled with an authority that made them want to kneel. Children of the younger cycle, the voice said, why do you struggle so against the inevitable? The Devourers are not your enemy, they are simply fulfilling their nature. Who are you? Xylith asked aloud, though she somehow knew the entity would hear her thoughts. I am what remains of the first civilization to achieve true transcendence.